Today on Fire 180, we're going to be discussing life, specifically the unborn. I'll be sharing what converted me from being a passive pro-life supporter to speaking out on their behalf. In addition, I'll be sharing a presentation that a very close friend of mine and I offered to various groups, including her testimony that, trust me, you do not want to miss. Welcome to Fire 180, where we discuss faith and reason, connecting hearts and minds, and change attitudes 180 degrees. Today, we'll be sharing with you a talk that a close friend of mine and I offered to various groups, from churches to youth groups and many more. And in this talk, I'll be sharing what converted me from being passive to speaking out for the most defenseless. Then you will hear from my friend Terry Spearns and her witness of someone who was very young in a large Catholic family who became pregnant and gave her baby up for adoption. Terry and I have given this presentation many times in person, and the feedback has been incredible and in many cases been life-changing. The right to choose an abortion in many countries is legal. And what Terry and I are simply doing is offering a non-judgmental educational presentation so that women and young girls can make an informed decision if they become in a situation of having an unwanted pregnancy. Recently, one of our Fire 180 team members suggested that Terry and I record our talk so that everyone could hear it. So that's what today's video is. So I hope you enjoy. Today's talk is entitled Choose Life. I want to start with a quote: "When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." Depending on the lens that you see something through, often dictates the opinion or position that someone holds. And it's only when you change your lens that you look something through that your attitude or opinion changes. So when it comes to the unborn, let's look at what I think are the 6 most prevalent attitudes in our culture today. First of all, there's apathy. People that just don't care one way or the other. If it doesn't affect them, then do whatever floats your boat. Secondly, people who are ignorant or simply unaware. Many people are ignorant to what a pregnancy is, especially in its early stages. I've witnessed this countless times with people, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later. The third attitude is denial. You know, like that cartoon where it says, "I'm just selective about the reality that I accept." Also, it's the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. I believe that for many who want to remain ignorant is so that they can live in this denial. I believe that denial allows people to hold a blind eye and not accept any accountability for being complicit in their silence on abortion. The next attitude is being a pro-life activist, a person who campaigns to bring about political and social change, people actively involved in the pro-life cause. And there is nobody who embodies this more effectively than my cousin Stephanie Gray, arguably the most recognized and active defenders for the unborn on the planet. The 6th attitude towards the preborn is the attitude of the ones that have an agenda to suppress the truth. They want to silence the debate, and like the image where the truth about the gas tank is being suppressed by the needle being taped, so too do they want the message about the unborn to be suppressed. This is especially prevalent among secular educators. I believe that ones that have this attitude are primarily people either that have had an abortion and don't want to be made to feel ashamed or guilty, or they're friends of someone who has and they want to protect them, or they want to reserve the right for themselves to possibly exercise this form of birth control in the future. You know, I think Ronald Reagan, the former president of the United States, said it best about this crowd that wants to suppress education. He says, quote, "I've noticed that everyone who is for abortion has already been born." So what is the truth that some want suppressed? Well, let me first tell you about a Doritos Super Bowl commercial from a few years ago. Doritos ran some ads where it shows a mom getting an ultrasound and a dad eating a bag of Doritos, and a doctor is performing the ultrasound, showing the image of the baby on the monitor. Then the baby senses the dad eating a Doritos chip and he tries to grab at it. And so the dad sees this on the monitor and he wiggles it this way, and then the baby tries to grab it. I'm not going to tell you how the ad ends, but it is hilarious, and I'm going to link it in the description of this video, but you definitely have to watch it because it is funny. But there was a lot of outrage about this video from the suppression crowd because what this ad did was it humanized the pregnancy. You see, they want to keep people ignorant. They want to keep people, especially young people, they want to keep them thinking that it's like a blob of unrecognizable tissue, like some kind of like a sponge or jello or something. But they do not want you to see that this is a baby. So this brings me to where I had my pro-life conversion. A few years ago, I joined the Knights of Columbus and I received their monthly magazine called The Columbian. In one of these magazines, there was an image. It was an image of a near identical model of a 12-week-old preborn baby and an ultrasound machine. I remember staring at that picture thinking, wow, like this is what we look like at 12 weeks old. I remember asking my kids and asking them, did you know that this is what a 12-week-old preborn looks like? None of them knew. They were all shocked. You know, a good friend of mine told me something a long time ago. When you see something, you can't unsee it. And I couldn't unsee that picture. So I thought if I could somehow share my experience with others, I might be able to change the lens how others view the unborn as well. So I did some research of where I could find some of these babies, because I knew if other people could hold them and see them, that it would change the attitudes just like it did mine. And I found where I could purchase them from a company called Heritage House. I'm going to put the link to the description in this video of where you can buy them. And even in Canadian dollars, they're less than $1 a piece. Think about it, $1 a piece to change people's opinions. At the time, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with these, but I knew that I had to do something. So with the financial support from Campaign Life Coalition, Nova Scotia, and the Knights of Columbus Council, 5017, great bunch of guys, we made our first purchase to donate them to women's crisis centers, pass them out at events such as mine and Terry's talk, March for Life, youth events, including events like Steubenville Atlantic, which is an amazing weekend for teenagers to get to experience Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So when Terry and I give this talk, it's at this point that we pass out one of these baby models to everyone that's present. And the reactions have been nothing short of a miracle. In the 4 or 5 years that we've been bringing these baby models in, we've distributed thousands of these across the Maritimes. And the stories that I've heard back from people have been nothing short of miraculous and healing for many. What's amazing is the reaction is from teenagers. Especially when teenage girls hold up this little baby up to their belly and say, wow, this is what a 12-week-old looks like inside of me. You should see the reactions. The bottom line for these young people is because, again, when they see it, they cannot unsee it. And they take one of these babies with them. They become missionaries for the unborn. They take them to school. They show their friends. They become the most convicted activists there are. There are no amount of words that can change hearts like one of these. The debate ends when someone sees or holds one of these. The truth is that people just don't know that this is what they look like at such a young age. I want to share 2 stories. My daughter's a hairdresser, and a few years ago when she was in hair school, she had one of these little babies and it fell out of her purse and onto the floor. Now, can you imagine at a hair school, and there's lots of young girls, young women there who are like my daughter, and all of a sudden they all gather around to say, what is this? And then my daughter shares that this is what a 12-week-old preborn baby looks like. And they were holding it and they were shocked. None of them knew that this is what a 12-week-old looked like, 3 months old. Another time I was asked to speak at a pro-life event, and I had a little table set up beforehand, and people were coming up and speaking to me beforehand, and I was passing out some babies and so on. And this little old nun, she came up and she was staring at them. And I explained to her what it was, and I asked her if she'd like to have one. And she kind of just shook her head no. I said, are you sure? So she took one. She stared at it for a minute, which is like an eternity of silence. I don't know what her story was, but she turned and walked away weeping. So, to summarize my part of this presentation, I think that Dr. Seuss sums it up best. A person's a person, no matter how small. I'd now like to introduce you to a very close friend of mine, Terry Spearns. Her story is truly inspirational.
Hi, My name is Terry, and David and I have known each other for many, many years. We both grew up in Herring Cove, we went to the same church, and even though he is way older than me, 1 whole year, we went to the same school together. If you had told me back then that David and I would be doing pro-life work together today, you would have had to pick me up off the floor from laughing. And although laughter is always good, there's a time in my life that I didn't find particularly funny. One of the greatest gifts a woman has is to bring new life into this world. Mind you, she can't do it by herself, but without her, ultimately, it's impossible. That ability, that power, that privilege is something to be treasured. However, sometimes a woman doesn't know what to do when presented with this gift, and I was no exception. When I was 21, I got pregnant, and I wasn't laughing, and I didn't feel like I had this ability, power, or privilege. I was angry at myself for letting this happen. I was ashamed. This wasn't something that was supposed to happen to good Catholic girls. But most of all, I was scared to death. I would be lying to you if I told you I didn't consider abortion. I did. But thankfully, it was only a fleeting thought. As much as I didn't want to be pregnant, I couldn't come up with a justifiable reason to kill my baby. My first dilemma was how I was going to tell my family. No problem. I just didn't. How do you hide something like that? Well, fortunately, or unfortunately, I didn't get much bigger than I am today. And no, I'm not pregnant. I was so afraid of disappointing my mother that I just couldn't bring myself to say the words. I think deep down she knew, but she didn't want to admit it either. So I decided, in my head, that I would carry my baby to term, go away to deliver him, then give him up for adoption. Problem solved. In theory. But basically, that is what I did. I told my parents that I needed a vacation. They used to live in Sydney River and had friends there, and I always liked going to Cape Breton, so I decided that is where I would go. I also knew there was a hospital there because my oldest brother was born there. I left my home on a Monday afternoon. Tuesday night I was in the hospital, and very early Wednesday morning at 12:44, I delivered my baby. I dare any of you to challenge that God was not part of my journey. How was that for perfect timing? When I checked into the hospital, I made it quite clear that I was giving my baby up for adoption. The way they treated me changed from that moment on. They tried to keep me from seeing my baby, but for those of you who have delivered, you know that unless you're blindfolded or just not looking, it's impossible not to see the child that you deliver. They relented and handed me my baby, and from that moment on, my life changed completely. I was no longer the same old Terry. I was a mother. But did it count, since I was giving him up for adoption? Of course it did. Truth be told, and it is backed up by science, that the second you conceive, you become a mother. I knew deep in my heart that I couldn't give this child everything that he deserved. I wanted him to have a mother and a father, and I wasn't able to provide that for him. So I put him above all, and I gave him to a family who is very willing and very able to provide for all of his needs. In retrospect, for sure, but even then, as sad as it was for me to say goodbye to my son, I knew I had done the right thing. My story could end here, but it doesn't. Fast forward 19 years. That is when I got to meet the handsome young man that I gave up for adoption all those years ago. There are absolutely no words that can describe what I felt when I came face to face with my son. The weekend that I drove to Cape Breton to meet Kyle was one of the most emotional times of my life. I thought about the past 19 years, from the time I realized I was pregnant, the entire pregnancy, running away to Cape Breton, delivering my child after a 3-hour labor, and yes, I'm bragging there, the heartbreak of leaving him behind, coming home to tell my family, living my life without him, wondering how his life was. It all made for quite a drive. At times I laughed, at times I cried so hard I could hardly see the road. But it was all worth it for what awaited me at the end of this journey. Kyle greeted me with a huge hug. His parents likewise, and with gratitude. Everyone I met that weekend either hugged me or thanked me or both. If I ever questioned that what I did was the right thing, all doubts were removed that weekend. This child had made so many people happy. His parents, his extended family, his friends, and me. And the story still doesn't end here. Kyle came to my home to meet the rest of his newfound birth family. As overwhelming as it was for me to meet his family, I'm sure he felt the same way when he met mine, because I come from a family of 9, and I have 15 nieces and nephews. But he fit in from the moment he walked through my door. After meeting Kyle, I knew I had to share my story. Most people didn't even know that I had a baby. So when the story came out in commercials that we did about adoption, many people were shocked. Our story was also featured on an episode of Focus on the Salt and Light TV network, in an episode called Adopting Love. I also put myself out there in one of the Signs for Life campaigns in Halifax. And now I'm here with you. If any one of these efforts can save even one life, it's totally worth it. Today, Kyle is 35 years old and is married. I even got to go to his wedding. He and his wife Hillary are both teachers. Before I conclude, I want to share with you the best part of my story. I am now a proud grandmother to 2 beautiful baby girls, Anna and Clara. I can't imagine this world without all of them in it. Thankfully, I don't have to.
Terry's story is amazing, and she is the real hero in this whole presentation and this talk that we do. And at this time in our presentations that we do, there's usually not a dry eye to be seen in the room. But we also have a Q&A time, and some of the questions that Terry will often get, especially by some of the younger kids that are in the room, young girls, teenage girls. So some of the questions that they would ask her is a question like, Terry, when you first told your mother, what was that experience like for both you and for her?
Actually, I told my mother over the phone. And I told her after Kyle was born. I called her on the day I left the hospital. And it was very hard for me because at that point I had already made up my mind that I was giving this child up for adoption. And basically I told her she became a grandmother, but I'm not bringing my baby home. So it was tough, but we all got through it. My family was very supportive. They told me that if I wanted to bring him home, that I could, and they would help raise him. But as I said earlier, that's not what I wanted for him. I wanted him to have a mother and a father and a family, and he had that. He had his parents also adopted another boy, so he had a brother growing up, and that's exactly what I wanted for him. So
another question that Terry's frequently asked is, what's the adoption process like?
Well, there was a social worker in the hospital, and this is a funny part of the story, was the only thing that I requested was that he be brought up in a Catholic family. And the funny part about that was that the hospital was St. Rita Hospital, the social worker was Sister Mary Ellen Grant, and the adoption agency was called Nazareth House. So I think that asking for him to be brought up in a Catholic family was a bit of a redundant request. However, because I was only staying in Cape Breton for a short while, I ended up signing the adoption papers back here in Halifax. And they spell everything out for you. Everything's obviously, because it's a legal document. And they told me then that I had to wait until he was at least 18. But when he was 18, the laws had changed and it turned to 19. I really couldn't tell you what the laws are today. But as a birth mother, I couldn't just ask to meet him. He had to make the request. So if he didn't want to meet me ever, that would be the end of it for me. But I had to sign a paper that said, yes, I would be willing for him to meet me. It turned out that he always wanted to meet me.
Okay, so, all right, now Phyllis and the rest, how did the meeting come about?
Just before Kyle turned 19, my mother died. And Mom and Dad had died 2 years before, but they always considered him a grandchild, even though he wasn't a daily part of our lives. And when Mom died, she left all of her grandchildren a small amount of money in her will, and she left him the same amount of money. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to find him, to give him the money, and would see how it went from there. Because he wasn't 19 yet, but he was turning 19 later, like shortly thereafter, and we just waited a couple of weeks. We did everything that we had to do. I wrote him a letter, he wrote me a letter. It was all non-identifying information. He did send me a few pictures though, and I couldn't believe it when I saw the pictures, because he looked so much like my family.
Wow.
He looked exactly like my oldest nephew.
Wow.
Yeah. And the funny part is, even he could see it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I know I found the right kid.
So Terry, you mentioned that you were part of a Signs for Life campaign. Can you just explain to people like what that is and how it impacted you?
I was involved in a Prolife group in Halifax with two women, Julie and Stephanie, and they had an idea to put signs up on billboards and on buses, and my sign was on the bus, but it was just to promote adoption over abortion. And so because I was promoting adoption in my commercials and in the Focus TV show, they used me to put my story out there on the buses.
So Terry, the last question is, when you actually went to meet Kyle, and can you just share a little bit about what that experience was like?
It was just so amazing. It's like I said, you know, words can't really describe what you feel when you come face to face. But what really, really warmed my heart was the way his parents treated me. They welcomed me into their house. I spent the weekend at their house, and I've been back to visit them a few times since. And it was just like, they were just so thankful and so grateful, and there was no jealousy, no anything to think that maybe I had come to try to take Kyle away, right? I didn't come to make a claim. I just wanted to meet him and make sure that everything was great in his life, and it was. I mean, He has a university education. Obviously, he's a teacher. He travels, and he just had an amazing life thanks to his parents, Lowell and Chris. And they were very happy to have me be a part of his life as well. So it was like the fairy tale ending that anyone would have asked for.
Wow. Thank you very much. And again, for all the girls who are like Terry, if she can do it,
you can too.
You can too. So this is our pro-life talk. I know that for many of you, your paradigm has changed and you'd like to somehow become involved. Maybe you'd like to share this video. Maybe you'd like to order some of the babies and distribute somehow on your own. Maybe you'd like to organize one of these talks in your parish or share this video to a youth group. I'll leave you with this. Jesus says, whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me. So the next time that you're in Mass and you recite the prayer, I confess, please think about speaking up for the unborn when you say, for what I have done and for what I have failed to do. So that when you stand before God, you will hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. If you've enjoyed today's video and would like more people to see this, then please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe button below and the notification bell. And with YouTube's algorithms, more people will see it. Thank you very much. God bless.